Now that I've talked about some of the tweets that I've read lately, and I never go into the details about them, I just go into extrapolating it to my own context that I've created with myself, because other people are doing details on certain things, and I'm doing details on certain things and relating a few of their details to my details, but not going into it fully. Something that I feel like I will go into more is this exploration with this Muse brain sensing headband. And I'm pretty excited about it, and I want to share a few of my preliminary findings. And I don't even know if they're findings at all. It's just looking at what it's showing and making stuff up. That's what I do. I make stuff up to create my own understanding and also find the facts that I need at the same time. And so what I really like about this brain headband is that it gives me a chance to look at what my brain is doing. So as somebody with a label of bipolar disorder, I've been told a lot of things about my brain, directly or indirectly through the studies I read, just all the messages out there about how defective the brain is, how it's going to get worse over time, how so many things I've been told about my brain, and other people are being told about their brain. But now we actually have a chance to look at what our brain is doing, and that to me is really cool. So I've actually thought of quite a few different ways that I can utilize this to see what's happening. For example, I wonder if the brain has any kind of response when holding a psych med. So I don't want to actually eat it, but there's something called applied kinesiology or muscle testing, where you can test if a substance makes you go weak or strong using your muscle reflex, or using this kind of test. Like if I say Seroquel and I think of Seroquel, I can't actually keep my two fingers together here when I pull the other ones through. But if I say or feel or think of the Hearty Nutritionals product, I can't actually pull through, and that's just thinking about it. I'm not holding it, but another way is to actually hold it and get somebody to push down on your arm to see if there's a strong or a weak response. And they do this kind of demonstration sometimes in self-esteem workshops. I'm just making that up. So you can actually think really mean thoughts about yourself and then do this muscle test and you'll be weak. It makes your nervous system weak. It makes your whole body weak, what you're holding in mind. And then do happy thoughts and then your body goes strong. So I'm wondering if there will be any kind of brain response to thinking about or holding these medications. And this headband might not be sensitive enough to pick that up. It just has a couple of electrode points, so it's still not necessarily comprehensive, but it at least gives me a chance to look at my brain. It's like my brain looking at my brain. And this whole process of self-dialogue has been my brain talking to my brain and the brain talking to itself more and more and more. So now it's giving another way to look and have language around looking at the brain. And I've discovered a few little things already, and I don't know if they're true, but I'm just going to go along with the discoveries and revise them as I go. Just like along the way, I revise the way I talk to myself, or I think about things, or I consider things. It's an ongoing and evolving thing, and I'm not going to get stuck on anything in particular. So I already had a video showing a few of the screenshots of the information that is shown when I put on the Muse headband using the Muse Monitor app, which shows the raw data. And I'm going to have to get a copy of Excel for Mac so I can graph some of this data. Another thing I have to do is try this on another person to see if their peaks are different than mine. So that's something that I noticed, is that I have these same peaks when I was inside sitting in my room. there were these same peaks in the beta range and the gamma range, and I made a little side by side to show those peaks. But what I also wanted to show with this, I was really curious, and I noticed there's a peak at 60 hertz. And 60 hertz is actually the EMF frequency in North America, in all the plugs and everything. So I was wondering, well, is that showing up because of the EMF? Because I was inside. So I went outside and sat outside, and sure enough, that peak disappeared. So that isn't one of my brain waves. But the other ones are still there. So I made a little side by side to show that. So that was my first little experiment, in a way, was being outside. There is no 60 hertz peak, but then the other ones are still there. So I'm wondering if that's sort of my little brain fingerprint, in a way. And so now I want to try this on somebody else and see if they have different peaks in beta and gamma. And I'm kind of wondering if they'll have any gamma, because I was kind of predicting that my brain has some access to gamma states as part of this map consciousness thing. So I need to try it on someone else to see if they have gamma waves or not. They sure could. I'm just wondering. And that's nothing like this big trial to see exactly what it all means, but I'll do some of my own little experiments when I can. And then after that, I will look more at what this information is telling me, because I can know something of what the information is telling me just by doing some comparisons. And then another thing that I noticed was I went to a park and put the headband on.
That's a great spot.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. And I noticed at first the one graph seemed pretty ubiquitous throughout with wiggly lines. There are no real distinguishable peaks. But it also showed more delta activity. The red line representing delta is much, much higher. So it seems like being outside, the brain has more delta and alpha activity going on. And there weren't really any peaks in the beta or gamma. It was almost like just being outside. I was nothing. I wasn't this human brain with all these little peaks and things going on. It was like consistent with nature. Like I was one with nature. And I don't know if that's true. And then after sitting out for a while, there were some gamma and beta peaks that were the same as the ones that have been shown earlier. They just had a lower amplitude. So I'll show that as well. And there was also this other screenshot. One is the first day that I had the headband, and the next is when I was outside in the park, and the delta is just way higher. You'll notice that the red line, which is delta, is way higher than when I was just sitting inside. So to me, this is right away showing something very important, that my brain has more alpha and delta and theta, I think. And then I noticed after I was sitting in the park for a little while, the orange gamma line actually went higher than the beta. And that was the only time I've seen that. So it was like being outside for a period of time causes a suppression in the beta, which is more associated with thinking and cognition and the ego stuff. And then there was more gamma and a lot more delta. So just seeing this basic thing, being able to see my brain waves, is showing me how much better it is for me to be outside. And I felt a lot more well-being being outside as well. So it could be, for me personally, my brain is saying, be outside. There's more delta, there's less beta, there's more gamma. The gamma is actually higher than the beta in terms of the decibels. And I don't even know what all this stuff means exactly, but just having a basic understanding of some science, because I do have that background somewhat, it's just obvious to be indoors and have more of something and then be outdoors and have more of something else, like the delta. The delta was never that high when I was indoors. So since our brains aren't separate, they're part of everything, being out in nature is just giving the brain access to completely different brain waves. Yet those peaks did come back of the beta and gamma with much less amplitude, and they were also bouncing up and down more. When I was inside, they would just stay up, but when I was outside, they were sort of more rhythmic. like resting back down and then going back to the peak. So that was kind of cool too, to see that it's not like this hyper alertness. Those peaks do subside and sort of breathe in and out like a wave, as opposed to just always being on. So to me, this is telling me a lot about my brain already. So I do want to see if other people have gamma waves, or how this works if people have different peaks as sort of a brain fingerprint, and seeing if the effects of being outside are similar. So this might actually give us, as someone with some kind of mental illness label, saying that we're deficient, ways to see where our brain is happiest. So if we have one of these devices and we can go around and say, oh, my brain likes this, oh, my brain doesn't like that, oh, it likes this, oh, it likes that, then we have a clearer picture than just say maybe our ego pleasurable likes. For example, I might think, well, I just love to be at home watching TV, but then my brain doesn't seem to like it. And I feel too lazy to get out in nature, but then the brain feels a lot more calm. So going based on brain waves might be something really interesting. And I already know subjectively that being outside is really good for me. And now it seems like having those more relaxed brain waves happening shows that it is really good for me. So I think this is really cool. I might be able to show this to some of my friends and go around and map out where people's brains are happiest. So this is partly why I feel like I need my own little research laboratory. And maybe I don't really. Maybe just checking certain times and places and seeing what my brain is doing is enough. But it would be cool also to use it to show the brain is not defective. It just maybe doesn't like certain things that are deemed normal in society, like being indoors most of the time. So I can't wait for my little external battery pack to arrive, because then I can just stay in the park all day. Right now, my phone battery is probably low, and I want to walk around the park and I don't want to run out of battery while doing so. I just thought of a language translation while walking, so I figured I may as well extrapolate on the go. And I was thinking about the term bipolar disorder, and I would transform that to bipolar diff-order. Diff standing for different, because it is a different order. It's not necessarily a disorder, but the brain gets in touch with a different order of operation, a different algorithm than the one it has been conditioned and programmed to utilize as its mode of operating through the world. And when that happens, it can feel a little chaotic, but by acknowledging that it's something of a different order, then we're invited to explore and understand and discover, not just manage and fit back in and recover. So that's why I feel like it could be called bipolar disorder. And I would call it omnipolar disorder, because it's not just bi. It's not just up and down. Those who would observe us, like psychiatrists and clinicians, would ask us to say, well, are you elevated or are you depressed? They just want to know if we're up and down. But really, it's rich, it's omnipolar, it's not bi-directional. And when we begin to discover for ourselves, then we realize that our brain is operating in an omnipolar disorder. And we can discover the richness in each moment. Non-linear and non-local. My vision is not focal. Don't tell me to focus. It's a bunch of hocus pocus. Don't try to manage me. You'll only damage me. There really is no me. If only you could see. I had another insight that people aren't bipolar, but perhaps thought is bipolar, meaning that thoughts are either good or bad, or pleasurable or painful. Of course, they can be functional, which is a different category, but the thoughts that apply to the me, So the me is just a bunch of thoughts. But we are not our thoughts if one takes the time to delve into teachers such as Eckhart Tolle. So can we disidentify from thought altogether as it pertains to the me, not try to get thoughts in order? As long as we have thought in operation as our primary driver, then yeah, we could be subject to this good and bad being superimposed on it. Can we take that judgment away of good and bad and just ride the waves of energy, whether it be thought or some other rich dimension of being human?